Welcome, brave souls, to Dreadful Diaries, where the shadows whisper secrets and the night holds untold horrors. If you crave the thrill of the unknown, make sure to subscribe and join our community of fellow horror enthusiasts. Now, dim the lights, grab a blanket, and let's dive into our first tale of terror. When Sarah first saw the listing for the apartment, it seemed too good to be true. A spacious two-bedroom in a historic building, just a few blocks from her new job, and at a price that fit her budget perfectly. The only catch: she would have to share the space with a roommate. But after a few interviews, she met Emily, a friendly and easygoing woman who seemed to share her taste in decor and lifestyle. They quickly signed the lease and moved in. The first few weeks were blissful. The two women bonded over late-night snacks and shared stories about their lives. Emily was a bit of an enigma, often speaking in vague terms about her past, but Sarah found her intriguing. There was something comforting about Emily's presence, even if she sometimes felt a chill in the air when they were together. One evening, as they were settling in for a movie night, Sarah noticed something odd. The lights flickered, and the temperature in the room dropped suddenly. She brushed it off as a draft from the old windows. But as the days went by, strange occurrences began to pile up. Objects would move slightly from where she left them, and she would hear soft whispers when she was alone in the apartment. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked Emily one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" Emily replied, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Never mind," Sarah said, shaking her head. "I must be imagining things." But she wasn't. The whispers grew louder, and shadows danced at the corners of her vision. One night, Sarah woke up to find Emily sitting at the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the wall. "Emily," she called out, her heart racing. Emily turned slowly, her expression vacant. "Do you ever feel like you're not alone?" Emily asked, her voice distant. "Of course, I do. We live together," Sarah replied, trying to lighten the mood. But Emily's gaze remained unfocused, and Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. The next day, Sarah decided to do some research on the building's history. She discovered that it had once been a boarding house in the early 1900s, and several tenants had mysteriously disappeared over the years. One name stood out: Emily Carter, a young woman who had vanished without a trace in 1923. That night, Sarah confronted Emily. "I found something about you," she said, her voice trembling. You're the Emily who disappeared." Emily's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "I've been waiting," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't move on until I find out what happened to me." Sarah's heart raced. "What do you mean? How can I help you?" "I remember a man," Emily said, her voice barely audible. "He was the last person I saw. He promised to help me, but I never made it out of this place." Determined to help her roommate, Sarah began to dig deeper into the building's history. She visited the local library, poring over old newspapers and records. After days of research, she uncovered a chilling story. Emily had been involved with a man who had a dark reputation. He was suspected of foul play, but no evidence was ever found, and the case went cold. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah returned home. "Emily, I think I know what happened," she said, her voice steady. "You were betrayed. But we can find justice for you." Emily's eyes lit up with hope. "You believe me?" "Of course," Sarah replied. "We'll figure this out together." That night, Sarah set up a séance, hoping to connect with Emily's spirit and gain more insight into her past. As they sat in the dim light of candles, Sarah felt a surge of energy in the room. The air crackled, and the temperature dropped again. Shadows flickered, and a voice echoed through the darkness. "Help me," it whispered, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. "I am the one who took her," the voice replied, filled with malice. "She was never meant to leave." Emily's presence grew stronger, and Sarah could feel her fear. "We need to confront him," Emily urged, her voice trembling. "He's still out there." With newfound determination, Sarah and Emily set out to find the man who had betrayed her. They discovered he was still living in the area, now an elderly man. With a mix of fear and resolve, they confronted him, demanding answers. As they stood before him, the man's face twisted in recognition. "You shouldn't have come here," he hissed, his eyes darkening. "You don't know what you're meddling with." But Sarah stood her ground. When Mark and Lisa first laid eyes on the old farmhouse, they were captivated by its charm. Nestled on the outskirts of a small town, the house had a rustic appeal with its weathered wood and sprawling fields. It was the perfect place to start their new life together, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. They signed the lease without hesitation, eager to make it their own. The first few days were filled with excitement as they unpacked boxes and decorated their new home. However, as they began to settle in, they noticed something strange. In the dim light of the living room, there were dark stains on the walls that seemed to seep through the paint. At first, they thought it was just old water damage, but the more they looked, the more it resembled something sinister. "Maybe we should just paint over it," Lisa suggested, trying to dismiss the unease creeping into her mind. "Yeah, it's probably just an old house thing," Mark replied, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the days turned into weeks, the stains became more pronounced, almost as if they were alive, shifting and changing in the light. Lisa began to have nightmares, vivid dreams of a woman in a white dress, her face twisted in anguish, pleading for help. Each morning, she would wake up drenched in sweat, the image of the woman haunting her thoughts. One evening, while Mark was at work, Lisa decided to investigate the stains further. Armed with a flashlight, she examined the walls closely. The stains were darker in some areas, and as she traced her fingers over them, she felt a chill run down her spine. It was then that she noticed something peculiar, a faint outline of a handprint, as if someone had pressed against the wall in desperation. Heart racing, Lisa decided to dig deeper. She went to the local library to research the history of the farmhouse. What she uncovered sent chills down her spine. The house had a dark past. It had once belonged to a family that had mysteriously vanished decades ago. The last known occupants were a couple, and their disappearance was shrouded in rumors of violence and tragedy. Determined to uncover the truth, Lisa returned home and confronted Mark. "We need to talk about the stains," she said, her voice trembling. "I found out about the family that lived here before us. They disappeared, and I think it has something to do with what's happening in this house." Mark frowned, skepticism etched on his face. "It's just an old house, Lisa. People disappear all the time. It doesn't mean it's connected to us." But Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That night, as they lay in bed, she heard whispers echoing through the halls. She sat up, her heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to Mark. "Hear what?" he replied, groggy and irritated. "Never mind," she said, feeling foolish. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The following day, Lisa decided to confront the stains again. She took a cloth and began to scrub at the wall, hoping to erase the evidence of whatever had happened there. As she scrubbed, the cloth turned crimson, revealing the truth. These were not just stains, they were blood. Panicking, she stumbled back, her breath quickening. "Mark! Come here," she shouted. Mark rushed in, his expression shifting from annoyance to horror as he saw the bloodied cloth in her hands. "What the hell is this?" he exclaimed. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," Lisa said, her voice shaking. But before they could leave, the temperature in the room dropped, and the whispers grew louder, coalescing into a single voice. "Help me," it cried, echoing through the walls. Mark and Lisa exchanged terrified glances. "What do you want?" Mark shouted, his voice trembling. "Find me," the voice pleaded, filled with sorrow. "I am trapped." With a mix of fear and determination, they decided to uncover the truth behind the voice. They returned to the library, digging deeper into the history of the farmhouse. They discovered that the woman in the white dress was named Clara, the last known resident of the house. She had been a victim of domestic violence, and her husband had been the prime suspect in her disappearance. But he had vanished without a trace, leaving the mystery unsolved. Armed with this knowledge, Lisa and Mark returned home, ready to confront the spirit. "Clara, we know what happened to you," Lisa called out, her voice steady. "We want to help you find peace." The air grew heavy, and the whispers intensified. "He is still here," Clara's voice echoed, filled with anguish. "He won't let me go." Suddenly, the walls began to shake, and the bloodstains pool. When Daniel first stepped into the old cottage, he was struck by its serene beauty. Nestled at the edge of a dense forest, the house exuded a sense of peace that he desperately craved after years of city life. The walls were adorned with rustic charm, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and earth. It was the perfect escape, a place to start anew after a painful breakup. As he settled in, Daniel reveled in the tranquility of his surroundings. The only sounds were the rustling leaves and the occasional chirp of birds. It was a stark contrast to the cacophony of the city, and he found solace in the silence. But as the days passed, he began to notice something unsettling about the quiet. At first, it was just a feeling, a weight in the air that made him uneasy. Then, late one night, as he lay in bed, he heard it, a faint whispering, like the echoes of distant conversations. He sat up, straining to listen, but the sounds faded away, leaving him in the oppressive silence once more. "Just my imagination," he muttered to himself, shaking off the unease. But the whispers returned night after night, growing louder and more frantic. They seemed to seep through the walls, filling the space with a sense of desperation. Determined to uncover the source of the sounds, Daniel began to research the history of the cottage. He visited the local library and pored over old newspapers and records. What he discovered sent chills down his spine. The cottage had a dark past. It had once been a home for troubled souls, a place where people came to escape their demons. Many had never left, their lives ending in tragedy. One name stood out, Margaret Holloway, a woman who had lived in the cottage decades ago. She had been a recluse, rumored to have lost her mind after a series of personal tragedies. The townsfolk whispered that her spirit still lingered in the house, trapped in the silence that had once offered her solace. That night, as Daniel lay in bed, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. "Help us," they cried, a chorus of voices filled with anguish. He could hear the pain in their words, the desperation of souls longing for release. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice trembling. "What do you want?" "Free us," the voices pleaded, echoing through the darkness. "We are lost." Daniel's heart raced as he realized that the silence he had cherished was filled with the screams of those who had once lived there. They were trapped, their stories left untold, and he was the only one who could help them. Determined to find a way to release the spirits, Daniel set out to learn more about Margaret and the others who had suffered in the cottage. He visited the town's historical society, where he uncovered more about the tragic events that had unfolded within its walls. He learned that Margaret had been a kind-hearted woman who had taken in those in need, but her compassion had led to her downfall. The weight of their pain had consumed her, and she had succumbed to despair. That night, Daniel returned to the cottage, ready to confront the spirits. He lit candles and set up a small altar in the living room, placing photographs and mementos he had gathered from his research. "I'm here to listen," he called out, his voice steady. "I want to help you find peace." As the candles flickered, the air grew heavy with energy. The whispers swirled around him, a cacophony of voices rising and falling like a haunting melody. "Thank you," they murmured, their tones filled with gratitude and sorrow. Daniel closed his eyes, focusing on the voices. "Tell me your stories," he urged. "I will remember you." One by one, the spirits began to share their tales, stories of love, loss, and regret. He listened intently, feeling their pain wash over him. He learned of Margaret's kindness, of the lives she had touched, and the darkness that had ultimately consumed her. He felt their anguish, their longing for recognition and release. As the night wore on, Daniel felt a shift in the atmosphere. The whispers began to fade, replaced by a sense of calm. "Thank you," the voices echoed, softer now, filled with relief. "We are free." With that, the oppressive weight in the air lifted, and the silence that enveloped the cottage transformed. It was no longer a silence filled with screams, but a peaceful quiet that resonated with the memories of those who had once lived there. Daniel opened his eyes, tears streaming down his face. He felt a profound sense of connection to the spirits, a bond forged through their shared stories. The cottage, once a place of despair, had become a sanctuary of healing. From that day forward, Daniel embraced the silence, knowing it was no longer haunted by them. When Clara moved into the quaint, two-story house on Maple Street, she felt an immediate sense of belonging. The house, with its white picket fence and blooming garden, seemed to whisper promises of new beginnings. After a tumultuous year filled with heartbreak and loss, Clara was ready to start fresh. She spent her days unpacking boxes and decorating her new space, reveling in the warmth of the sun streaming through the windows. One rainy afternoon, while exploring the attic, Clara stumbled upon a dusty trunk tucked away in a corner. Curiosity piqued, she pried it open, revealing a collection of old clothes, trinkets, and a stack of yellowed photographs. As she sifted through the items, one photograph caught her eye, a faded image of a family standing in front of the very house she now called home. The family in the photograph was strikingly beautiful. A mother with soft, flowing hair, a father with a warm smile, and two children, an older girl and a younger boy, stood together, their faces radiating joy. Clara felt an inexplicable connection to them, as if they were reaching out from the past. She turned the photograph over, hoping to find a date or a name, but it was blank. Intrigued, Clara decided to hang the photograph in her living room, feeling it would add character to her new home. As the days passed, she often found herself gazing at the family, wondering about their lives and what had happened to them. The photograph seemed to pulse with energy, and she felt a strange sense of comfort in its presence. But soon, Clara began to notice odd occurrences. At night, she would hear soft laughter echoing through the halls, and sometimes, she could have sworn she saw shadows darting past her peripheral vision. The air in the house felt charged, as if it were alive with memories. She brushed it off as her imagination, but the feeling of being watched lingered. One evening, as she sat on the couch with a book, Clara glanced up at the photograph. To her shock, the family appeared different. The children looked older, and the mother's smile seemed tinged with sadness. Clara's heart raced as she realized that the photograph was changing before her eyes. Determined to uncover the truth, Clara returned to the attic, searching for any clues about the family. She found an old diary tucked beneath the trunk. The pages were brittle, but she carefully turned them, revealing the story of the family who had once lived in the house. Their names were the Millers, Thomas, Margaret, and their two children, Lily and Ben. As she read, Clara learned that the Millers had been a happy family until tragedy struck. Thomas had lost his job, and the family fell into despair. One fateful night, after a heated argument, Margaret and the children vanished without a trace. Thomas was left alone, consumed by grief, and the house fell into disrepair. Clara's heart ached for the Millers. She felt a deep sense of empathy for their plight, and as she read the final entry in the diary, she realized that Thomas had never given up hope of finding his family. The last words were a plea: "If anyone finds this, please help us. We are trapped in time, lost in the shadows of this house." Suddenly, the room grew cold, and Clara felt a presence behind her. She turned slowly, her breath hitching in her throat. The family from the photograph stood before her, their forms shimmering like mirages. They looked just as they did in the picture, but their expressions were filled with sorrow. "Help us," Margaret whispered, her voice echoing in the stillness. "We are trapped here, unable to move on." Clara's heart raced as she realized the truth. The family was not just a memory, they were spirits bound to the house, caught in a loop of time. "What can I do?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "You must help us find closure," Thomas replied, his eyes filled with desperation. "We need to confront the pain that binds us here." Determined to help, Clara gathered her courage. She suggested they hold a séance to communicate with the spirits and confront the unresolved emotions that had kept the Millers trapped. The family agreed, and together, they set up a small circle in the living room, lit candles, and held hands. As Clara closed her eyes, she focused on the love that had once filled the house. She called out to the spirits, inviting them to share their pain and their love. The air crackled with energy, and the room filled with whispers of memories, laughter, arguments, and moments of joy. One by one, the Millers began to speak, sharing their regrets and their love for one another. Clara felt their emotions wash over her, and she encouraged them to forgive themselves and each other. As they released their pain, the atmosphere shifted, and when Jake and Emily first drove into Maplewood Lane, they were enchanted by the picturesque neighborhood. Lush green lawns, charming houses with white picket fences, and children playing in the streets created an idyllic scene that felt like a postcard. After months of searching for the perfect home, they finally found it, a cozy 3-bedroom house with a wraparound porch. It was everything they had dreamed of. The couple quickly settled in, excited to start their new life. Their neighbors welcomed them with open arms, bringing over homemade cookies and offering to help with the unpacking. The Johnsons next door were particularly friendly, with their 2 kids, Sarah and Timmy, who were eager to make new friends. Everything seemed perfect. But as the days turned into weeks, Emily began to notice oddities in the neighborhood. The Johnsons were always home, yet they rarely ventured outside. Their curtains were drawn tight, and the children seemed to play only in their backyard, never inviting Jake and Emily over. Whenever Emily tried to engage them in conversation, they would quickly change the subject or offer vague responses. One evening, While Jake was at work, Emily decided to bake some cookies and take them over to the Johnsons. She knocked on their door, but there was no answer. She waited a few moments, then knocked again, a little harder this time. Still nothing. Just as she was about to leave, she heard a faint sound coming from the backyard, a muffled cry. Her heart raced as she peered through the slats of the fence. What she saw sent chills down her spine. Sarah and Timmy were playing, but they were not alone. A shadowy figure loomed over them, its features obscured. Emily squinted, trying to make sense of the scene, but the figure seemed to blend into the darkness, its presence suffocating. Feeling uneasy, Emily returned home and shared her experience with Jake. "I think something is wrong with the Johnsons," she said, her voice trembling. "I heard a cry, and there was someone in their backyard." Jake shrugged it off, attributing it to her imagination. "It's probably just a neighbor helping them out. You know how kids can be, always playing make-believe." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was at play. Over the next few days, she observed the Johnsons more closely. They never left the house during the day, and at night, the sounds of muffled arguments would drift through the walls. She felt a growing sense of dread, as if the very air around her was thick with secrets. One night, unable to sleep, Emily decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. As she strolled down the quiet streets, she noticed that the other houses were just as silent as the Johnsons. It was as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. She paused in front of the Johnsons' house, drawn to the flickering light in the window. Suddenly, she heard a loud crash followed by a scream. Panic surged through her, and she rushed to the front door, her heart pounding. She knocked frantically, but there was no answer. Desperate, she peered through the window, her breath hitching in her throat. Inside, the living room was in disarray. Furniture was overturned, and the shadowy figure she had seen before was now clearly visible, a tall man with wild eyes, shouting at the children. "You will do as I say," he bellowed, his voice filled with rage. Emily's instincts kicked in. She turned and ran to the nearest neighbor's house, pounding on the door. A middle-aged woman answered, her expression puzzled. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Call the police. The Johnsons need help." Emily gasped, her voice frantic. The woman hesitated, glancing back into her house. "I don't know what you're talking about. The Johnsons are fine. They're just private." "Private? They're in danger." Emily insisted, but the woman shook her head, closing the door. Feeling helpless, Emily raced back to her house and dialed 911. "Please, you have to send someone to the Johnsons' house. There's a man, he's hurting the kids." The operator assured her that help was on the way, but as Emily hung up, she felt a wave of dread wash over her. What if the police didn't arrive in time? What if she was too late? Moments later, she heard sirens in the distance, and relief flooded her. She watched from her window as police cars pulled up to the Johnsons' house. Officers rushed to the door, and Emily held her breath, praying for the children's safety. After what felt like an eternity, the officers emerged, leading the children out of the house. They looked shaken but unharmed. Emily's heart soared, but her relief was short-lived as she noticed the officers escorting. When Sarah and Tom first laid eyes on the old Victorian house, they were captivated by its charm. The intricate woodwork, the sprawling garden, and the promise of history whispered to them as they walked through the creaking halls. It was the perfect place to start their new life together, away from the chaos of the city. After a whirlwind of paperwork and negotiations, they finally moved in, excited to make the house their home. As they unpacked boxes and decorated their new space, they noticed something odd. One of the doors on the second floor was locked tight, with no key in sight. It was an unassuming door, painted the same shade of faded blue as the others, but it piqued their curiosity. "What do you think is behind it?" Sarah asked, her eyes glinting with intrigue. "Probably just an old storage room," Tom replied, shrugging it off. "Let's focus on getting settled in." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the locked room. Over the next few days, she found herself drawn to it, often standing outside the door, listening for any sounds from within. At night, she would dream of the room, filled with shadows and whispers that sent chills down her spine. One evening, after a long day of unpacking, Sarah decided to investigate further. She rummaged through the boxes in the attic, hoping to find an old key or some clue about the room. As she sifted through dusty trinkets and forgotten memories, she stumbled upon an old journal. The leather cover was cracked, and the pages were yellowed with age. Curious, she opened it and began to read. The journal belonged to a woman named Eliza, who had lived in the house over a century ago. As Sarah read, she learned that Eliza had been a reclusive figure, rumored to have dabbled in the occult. The entries grew darker, filled with accounts of strange occurrences and a growing sense of dread. Eliza wrote about a locked room, a place where she had conducted her experiments, and the malevolent spirit that had been unleashed within its walls. "Beware the darkness," one entry warned. "It hungers for souls and will not rest until it claims what is rightfully its." Sarah's heart raced as she closed the journal, the weight of Eliza's words settling heavily on her. She rushed downstairs to find Tom. "You need to see this," she said, her voice trembling. Tom took the journal from her, flipping through the pages. "This is creepy, Sarah. But it's just an old story. We can't let it get to us." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That night, as they lay in bed, she heard faint whispers echoing through the house. She sat up, straining to listen, but the sounds faded away, leaving her in the oppressive silence. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to Tom. "Hear what?" he replied, groggy and irritated. "Never mind," she said, feeling foolish. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The next day, Sarah decided to confront the locked room. She gathered her courage and approached the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath and knocked softly. "Is anyone there?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. Silence answered her. Determined, she searched the house for a way to unlock the door. After hours of searching, she found an old skeleton key hidden in a drawer in the kitchen. Her heart raced as she approached the locked door once more. With trembling hands, she inserted the key and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, dust-filled room. As she stepped inside, the air grew cold, and a sense of foreboding washed over her. The room was filled with old furniture covered in white sheets, and the walls were lined with shelves of dusty books and strange artifacts. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface clouded with grime. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, and Sarah spun around, panic rising in her chest. "Tom," she shouted, but her voice echoed back at her, swallowed by the darkness. The temperature dropped further, and she felt a presence behind her. She turned slowly, her breath hitching in her throat. The mirror began to shimmer, and a figure emerged from its depths, a woman with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. It was Eliza. "Welcome," the spirit hissed, her voice a chilling whisper. "You've come to join me." Sarah stumbled back, her heart racing. "What do you want?" she cried, her voice trembling. "I need a vessel," Eliza replied, her smile widening. "You will help me reclaim my power." Desperation surged through Sarah as she realized the truth. Eliza had been trapped in the mirror. When Mark and Lisa moved into the old farmhouse on the outskirts of town, they were thrilled to finally have a place of their own. The house had character, with its creaky floorboards, vintage wallpaper, and a sprawling attic that promised endless possibilities. They envisioned cozy evenings by the fireplace and family gatherings in the spacious living room. However, as they settled in, an unsettling feeling began to creep over Mark. It started with the noises. At first, they were faint, soft thumps and rustling sounds that echoed through the walls at night. Mark brushed them off as the house settling or the wind playing tricks. But as the days turned into weeks, the sounds grew louder and more distinct. It was as if something was moving around in the attic, and the feeling of being watched began to gnaw at him. "Did you hear that?" Mark asked Lisa one night as they lay in bed, the sounds echoing above them. "Hear what?" she replied, half asleep. "Never mind," he said, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. One evening, after another restless night, Mark decided he could no longer ignore the noises. He climbed the creaky stairs to the attic, armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination. As he reached the top, he hesitated, the air thick with dust and an unsettling silence. He flicked on the flashlight, illuminating the cluttered space filled with old furniture, boxes, and forgotten memories. As he scanned the room, he felt a chill run down his spine. The shadows seemed to dance in the corners, and he could have sworn he saw something move out of the corner of his eye. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered him. Mark took a deep breath and stepped further into the attic, his heart pounding in his chest. He moved toward a stack of boxes, and as he did, he felt a sudden rush of cold air. The flashlight flickered, and he turned to see a shadow dart across the far wall. He froze, his breath hitching in his throat. "Who's there?" he shouted, trying to sound braver than he felt. The shadow paused, and for a moment, Mark thought he saw a figure, a dark silhouette with no discernible features, watching him from the corner of the attic. Panic surged through him, and he stumbled back, nearly tripping over a box. "Get a grip, Mark," he muttered to himself. "It's just your imagination." But as he turned to leave, the shadow moved closer, and he felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him. He bolted down the stairs, heart racing, and slammed the attic door shut behind him. "I'm not going back up there," he declared to Lisa, who was sitting on the couch, engrossed in a book. "What's wrong?" she asked, looking up at him with concern. "I think there's something in the attic," he said, his voice shaky. "I saw a shadow." Lisa raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched on her face. "It's probably just the light playing tricks. You know how old houses can be." But Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. Over the next few days, he avoided the attic, but the noises continued, scratching, whispering, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Each night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, convinced that whatever was up there was waiting for him to return. Finally, after a particularly restless night, Mark decided he had to confront his fears. He gathered his courage and returned to the attic, flashlight in hand. As he climbed the stairs, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist around him. He reached the top and flicked on the flashlight, illuminating the space once more. "Show yourself," he shouted, his voice echoing in the silence. To his horror, the shadow reappeared, moving closer, its form becoming more defined. It was a figure of a man, tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through him. Mark's heart raced as he realized this was no ordinary shadow, it was a spirit, trapped in the attic. "Help me," the figure whispered, its voice a chilling rasp. "I've been waiting." Mark's fear turned to confusion. "Waiting for what?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Trapped," the spirit replied, gesturing to the walls around them. "I cannot leave this place. I need you to help me find peace." Mark's mind raced as he tried to comprehend what was happening. "How can I help you?" he asked, his heart pounding. "Uncover the truth," the spirit urged. "The house holds my secrets. You must find them." With that, the shadow began to fade, leaving Mark alone in the attic. When Rachel and David decided to leave the city behind, they envisioned a peaceful life in the countryside. After months of searching, they found a charming farmhouse nestled on a sprawling piece of land, surrounded by rolling hills and dense woods. The property was perfect for their dreams of a self-sustaining lifestyle, complete with a garden and a few chickens. They signed the papers without hesitation, eager to start their new adventure. The first few weeks were idyllic. They spent their days renovating the farmhouse, planting seeds in the garden, and enjoying the tranquility of rural life. However, as the sun began to set earlier and the nights grew longer, an unsettling feeling crept over them. Strange occurrences began to disrupt their peaceful existence. It started with the animals. The couple had brought a few chickens with them, but one by one, they began to disappear. At first, they thought it was just a predator, but soon they noticed strange markings in the dirt, deep scratches that looked almost like claw marks. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine, but David reassured her. "It's just nature," he said. "We'll figure it out." But the disappearances didn't stop there. One night, as they were settling in for bed, they heard a loud crash coming from the barn. David grabbed a flashlight and rushed outside, with Rachel following closely behind. As they approached the barn, they found the door swinging open, and inside, the hay was scattered everywhere, as if something had been thrashing about. "What the hell happened?" David muttered, shining the light around the barn. But there was no sign of an intruder, just the eerie silence of the night. The next day, Rachel decided to visit the local library to learn more about the area. As she flipped through old newspapers, she stumbled upon a series of articles that sent chills down her spine. The land they had purchased had a dark history. Decades ago, it had been the site of a brutal murder. A farmer had gone mad, killing his family before taking his own life. The townsfolk whispered that the land was cursed, haunted by the spirits of those who had suffered. Rachel's heart raced as she read the accounts. She hurried home, desperate to share her findings with David. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. David listened as she recounted the stories, but he remained skeptical. "It's just a legend, Rachel. People love to tell ghost stories about old places. We can't let it get to us." But as the days passed, the strange occurrences escalated. They began to hear whispers in the wind, voices calling out in the night. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. One evening, Rachel found a message scrawled in the dirt outside their front door: "Leave this place." Panic set in, and Rachel insisted they leave. "We can't stay here, David. This land is cursed," she pleaded. David, however, was determined to make it work. "We can't let fear control us. We'll figure this out together," he said, trying to reassure her. But the land had other plans. One night, as a storm raged outside, they were jolted awake by a loud banging on the walls. The house shook, and the lights flickered ominously. Rachel clutched David's arm, her heart racing. "What is happening?" she cried. "Stay here," David shouted, rushing to the window. Outside, he saw dark figures moving through the trees, their forms indistinct and shadowy. "I'll check it out," he said, but Rachel grabbed his arm, fear etched on her face. "Don't go out there. It's not safe." Ignoring her pleas, David opened the door and stepped outside. The wind howled, and the shadows seemed to swirl around him. "David!" Rachel screamed, but he was already lost in the darkness. Desperate, Rachel followed him into the storm, calling his name. The shadows closed in, and she felt a cold grip on her heart. "David!" she cried, but the wind swallowed her words. Suddenly, she saw him standing in the clearing, staring blankly into the darkness. "David, come back," she shouted, but he didn't move. It was as if he were entranced. Rachel rushed to him, grabbing his arm. "We need to go," she urged, but he just stared ahead, his eyes wide with fear. "They're here," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They want us." Before she could respond, the shadows surged forward, enveloping them both. Rachel felt a wave of despair wash over her, and she was pulled into a vision, a glimpse of the past. She saw the farmer, his face twisted in rage, as he committed his horrific acts. She felt the pain of the spirits trapped in the land, their cries echo. When the Johnson family moved into the old manor on the outskirts of town, they were filled with excitement and hope. The sprawling estate, with its grand architecture and lush gardens, seemed like a dream come true. After years of living in cramped apartments, they finally had space to breathe and grow. Mark and Lisa, along with their 2 children, Emma and Jake, envisioned a life filled with laughter and memories in their new home. As they unpacked boxes and settled in, the family couldn't shake the feeling that the house held secrets. The air felt heavy, and the shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. Lisa brushed it off as the remnants of an old building, but Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The manor had a history, and he was determined to learn more about it. One rainy afternoon, while the children played in the living room, Mark decided to visit the local library. He spent hours poring over old newspapers and records, uncovering the manor's past. To his shock, he discovered that the house had once been a children's home, a place for orphans and abandoned children. It had been operational for decades until a tragic fire had claimed the lives of several children, leaving the building abandoned for years. Mark's heart sank as he read the accounts of the children who had lived there. They were forgotten, their stories lost to time. He returned home, feeling a mix of sadness and dread. "Lisa, you won't believe what I found out," he said, his voice trembling. "What is it?" she asked, looking up from the kitchen where she was preparing dinner. "The house used to be a children's home," Mark replied, his brow furrowed. "And there was a fire, many children died here." Lisa's face paled. "That's terrible. But it's just a story, right? We're safe here." "Maybe," Mark said, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the past was still present in the walls of the manor. That night, as the family settled in for bed, Emma and Jake began to complain about strange noises coming from the hallway. "It sounds like someone is crying," Emma said, her voice small and frightened. "It's probably just the wind," Lisa reassured them, but Mark felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't ignore the feeling that the children's spirits were still lingering in the house, trapped in a cycle of sorrow. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences escalated. The children reported seeing shadows darting past their bedroom doors, and Lisa began to hear soft whispers echoing through the halls. One night, as she was tucking the kids in, she noticed a small, dusty toy on the floor, a wooden horse that hadn't been there before. "Where did this come from?" she asked, picking it up. "I don't know," Jake replied, his eyes wide. "It just appeared." That night, Lisa lay awake, unable to shake the feeling that they were not alone. The whispers grew louder, and she could almost make out the words, "Help us, remember us." Desperate for answers, Lisa decided to investigate the history of the children's home. She visited the local historical society, where she uncovered more about the tragic fire and the children who had lived there. Their names were etched in the records, and as she read their stories, she felt a deep sense of empathy for their plight. Returning home, Lisa shared her findings with Mark. "We need to do something," she said, her voice filled with determination. "These children deserve to be remembered." Mark nodded, feeling the weight of their responsibility. "We should hold a memorial for them," he suggested. "We can invite the community and honor their memory." The following weekend, the Johnsons organized a small gathering in their backyard. Neighbors and friends came together, bringing candles and flowers to pay tribute to the lost children. As they lit the candles and shared stories, Lisa felt a warmth enveloping her, as if the spirits were present, grateful for the recognition. That night, as the family returned to the house, the atmosphere felt different. The air was lighter, and the whispers had faded. Emma and Jake smiled, their fears seemingly lifted. "Can we keep the wooden horse?" Jake asked, holding it tightly. "Of course," Lisa replied, her heart swelling with love for her children. "It's a reminder of the children who lived here before us." As they settled in for the night, Lisa felt a sense of peace wash over her. The forgotten children were no longer lost, they had been remembered, their stories honored. And in that moment, the Johnson family knew that they had found not just a house, but a home filled with love, compassion, and the echoes of those who had come before them. When Mia and Alex moved into the old Victorian house, they were enchanted by its charm. The intricate woodwork, the high ceilings, and the sprawling garden all spoke to their dreams of a cozy life together. As they unpacked their belongings, they stumbled upon an antique mirror hidden away in a dusty corner of the attic. Its ornate frame was tarnished, and the glass was clouded with age, but there was something captivating about it. "Look at this!" Mia exclaimed, brushing off the dust. "It's beautiful. We should hang it in the living room." Alex hesitated, a shiver running down his spine. "I don't know, Mia. It looks a bit eerie." "Eerie or not, it's a piece of history," she replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Let's clean it up and see how it looks." After some effort, they hung the mirror above the fireplace, and it quickly became a focal point in their living room. For the first few days, everything seemed normal. They enjoyed their new home, hosting friends and family, and the mirror added a touch of elegance to the space. But soon, strange things began to happen. Mia noticed that the mirror seemed to reflect more than just their images. One evening, as she was getting ready for bed, she caught a glimpse of something moving behind her in the mirror. She turned around, but the room was empty. Dismissing it as her imagination, she went to bed, but the feeling of unease lingered. The next night, as they settled in for a movie, Mia glanced at the mirror and gasped. In its reflection, she saw a woman standing behind her, dressed in a tattered gown, her face twisted in anguish. Mia's heart raced, and she turned to Alex. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "See what?" he replied, looking puzzled. "The woman in the mirror. She was right behind me." Mia insisted, but when Alex looked, the mirror showed only their living room. "Maybe you're just tired," he suggested gently. "It's an old mirror, it could be playing tricks on you." But Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Over the next few days, the visions grew more intense. She began to see flashes of scenes in the mirror, images of the woman crying, children playing in the garden, and a fire raging in the house. Each vision left her feeling more unsettled, as if she were witnessing fragments of a tragic past. One night, unable to sleep, Mia decided to investigate the mirror further. She stood in front of it, staring into the glass, and whispered, "Who are you? What do you want?" To her shock, the mirror began to shimmer, and the image of the woman appeared once more. "Help me," the woman pleaded, her voice echoing in Mia's mind. "I am trapped in this place." Mia's heart raced. "Trapped? How can I help you?" "The fire, it took everything from me," the woman said, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You must uncover the truth." Determined to help, Mia spent the next few days researching the history of the house. She visited the local library and discovered that the Victorian had once belonged to a family named the Harringtons. The woman in the mirror was Eliza Harrington, who had lived there with her husband and children. Tragedy struck when a fire broke out, claiming the lives of Eliza and her children. The house had been abandoned for years, and the townsfolk whispered that Eliza's spirit lingered, searching for her lost family. Mia returned home, her heart heavy with the weight of Eliza's story. She shared her findings with Alex, who listened intently. "We need to do something," Mia said, her voice filled with determination. "Eliza deserves to be remembered." That night, they set up a small memorial in front of the mirror, placing candles and flowers as a tribute to Eliza and her children. As they lit the candles, the air in the room grew thick with emotion. Mia felt a connection to the spirit, as if Eliza were standing beside her, grateful for the recognition. Suddenly, the mirror began to shimmer again, and the reflection transformed. Mia and Alex gasped as they saw Eliza standing in the garden, surrounded by her children, laughter filling the air. But the scene shifted, and the fire erupted, engulfing the house in flames. Mia felt a wave of despair wash over her as she witnessed the tragedy unfold. "Please, don't let this happen again," Mia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We will remember you." As the vision faded, the room grew quiet. The mirror's surface returned to normal, but Mia felt a sense of peace enveloping her. The weight of Eliza's sorrow seemed to lift, and she knew. The Johnson family had always dreamed of owning a home in the quaint town of Maplewood. After years of saving, they finally found the perfect house, a charming Victorian with a wraparound porch and a garden that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. The price was surprisingly low, but the real estate agent assured them it was simply a seller's market. Little did they know, the house held more than just memories, it held a mystery. As they settled in, the family, Mark, Sarah, and their 2 children, Lily and Ben, felt an odd energy in the air. It was as if the house was alive, breathing with a history that was both inviting and unsettling. The first night, as they unpacked boxes, they heard soft whispers echoing through the halls. Mark dismissed it as the wind, but Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Days turned into weeks, and the strange occurrences began to escalate. Lily, the youngest, claimed to have made a new friend named Emily. She described Emily as a girl with long, dark hair who wore a white dress. At first, Sarah thought it was just an imaginary friend, but Lily spoke of Emily with such detail that it sent shivers down her mother's spine. One evening, while preparing dinner, Sarah noticed a family portrait hanging in the hallway. The woman in the picture bore an uncanny resemblance to Lily's description of Emily. When she asked Mark about it, he shrugged it off, attributing it to the house's age and the quirks that came with it. As the weeks passed, the family experienced more unsettling events. Objects would move on their own, doors creaked open without explanation, and shadows danced in the corners of their vision. One night, Ben woke up screaming, claiming he saw a figure standing at the foot of his bed. Mark and Sarah rushed to his side, but there was nothing there, only the lingering scent of lavender, which was peculiar since they had never used lavender-scented products. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah began researching the house's history. She discovered that the previous owner, a woman named Margaret Holloway, had died under mysterious circumstances. Rumors swirled in town about her tragic end. Some said she had been heartbroken, while others whispered of a more sinister fate. The deeper Sarah dug, the more she felt a connection to Margaret, as if the woman's spirit was reaching out to her. One stormy night, the family gathered in the living room, the wind howling outside. As they shared ghost stories, the lights flickered, and a sudden chill enveloped the room. Lily, with wide eyes, turned to her parents and said, "Emily wants to talk to you." Mark and Sarah exchanged worried glances. They decided to confront whatever presence lingered in their home. They gathered candles and sat in a circle, holding hands. "If you're here, Margaret, we want to understand," Sarah called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The air grew thick, and a soft whisper filled the room, "Help me." The voice was faint but unmistakable. The family felt a wave of sadness wash over them, and in that moment, they realized that Margaret was not a malevolent spirit, she was trapped, longing for closure. Determined to help Margaret find peace, the Johnsons sought the assistance of a local historian who specialized in the town's folklore. Together, they uncovered the truth. Margaret had been in love with a man who had left her, and in her despair, she had taken her own life in the very house they now called home. With this knowledge, the family held a small ceremony in the garden, planting a lavender bush in Margaret's memory. They spoke words of love and forgiveness, acknowledging her pain and inviting her spirit to move on. As they finished, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and the air felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences ceased. The house felt warmer, filled with a sense of peace that had been absent before. Lily no longer spoke of Emily, but she often mentioned how happy she felt in their home. The Johnsons embraced their new life, cherishing the memories they were creating while honoring the past. Though they had faced the ghost of the previous owner, they emerged stronger as a family, forever changed by the experience. The Victorian house, once a vessel of sorrow, became a sanctuary of love and understanding, a place where the past and present coexisted in harmony. And in the quiet moments, they could almost hear a soft whisper of gratitude carried on the wind, reminding them that some spirits just needed a little help to find. Emily and Jake had finally moved into their dream home, a charming Victorian house nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The walls were painted a soft cream, and the wooden floors creaked with character. After months of searching, they were thrilled to start their new life together. On their first evening, as they unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, a knock at the door interrupted their excitement. Standing on the porch were their new neighbors, an elderly couple named Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne. With warm smiles, they presented a beautifully wrapped package adorned with a deep red ribbon. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Mrs. Hawthorne exclaimed. "We thought you might enjoy this little gift." Curious and grateful, Emily and Jake accepted the gift, thanking the couple profusely. After the Hawthorns left, they placed the package on the dining table, eager to see what was inside. As they unwrapped the gift, they discovered an ornate, antique key. It was heavy and intricately designed, with a small tag attached that read, "For the door that holds the past." Confused but intrigued, they exchanged glances. What door could this key possibly open? That night, they decided to explore their new home. They searched every room, but no door seemed to match the key. Finally, in the attic, they found a small, dusty door hidden behind a stack of old boxes. The door was unremarkable, but the key fit perfectly. With a turn, the door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down into the shadows. With flashlights in hand, Emily and Jake descended the staircase, their hearts racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. At the bottom, they found themselves in a dimly lit cellar filled with cobwebs and old furniture. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate trunk, its surface covered in dust. As they approached the trunk, they noticed strange symbols carved into its sides. Jake knelt down and opened it, revealing a collection of old photographs, letters, and a diary. The items were dated back to the early 1900s, and as they sifted through them, a chilling story began to unfold. The diary belonged to a woman named Clara, who had lived in the house over a century ago. Her entries spoke of a happy life, but as the pages turned, the tone shifted. Clara wrote about her husband's increasing paranoia and strange behavior. He believed the house was haunted, claiming to hear whispers in the night and see shadows moving in the corners of his vision. One entry detailed a tragic event. Clara's husband had vanished without a trace, leaving her alone and desperate. The final entries were frantic, filled with fear and confusion, as Clara wrote about feeling watched and hunted. The last page was torn, leaving an ominous message unfinished. Emily and Jake exchanged horrified glances. What had happened to Clara and her husband? And why had the Hawthorns given them the key? Determined to uncover the truth, they decided to confront Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorn. The couple welcomed them into their home, a cozy space filled with plants and family photos. When Emily and Jake mentioned the key and the trunk, the Hawthorns exchanged worried looks. Mr. Hawthorn sighed heavily. "We were hoping you wouldn't find that. The house has a dark history, one that many prefer to forget. Clara's husband was never found, and Clara herself disappeared shortly after. Some say the house is cursed." Mrs. Hawthorn added, "We thought the key might help you understand the past, but it seems it has only brought you trouble." Feeling a mix of fear and determination, Emily and Jake decided they couldn't let the past remain buried. They returned to the cellar, armed with the knowledge they had gained. They began to piece together Clara's story, hoping to find closure for her restless spirit. As they explored the cellar further, they discovered a hidden compartment in the wall. Inside, they found a locket containing a picture of Clara and her husband, along with a note that read, "I will find you again." It was clear that Clara had been searching for her husband, even in death. With the locket in hand, Emily and Jake returned to the Hawthorns' home. They proposed a plan to honor Clara's memory by holding a small memorial in the backyard of their house. The Hawthorns agreed, and together, they invited neighbors and friends to join them. On the day of the memorial, they shared Clara's story, lighting candles and placing flowers in her honor. As the sun set, a gentle breeze swept through the yard, and